Hello, everyone. Welcome to the audiobook masterclass. My name is Antoine Bandele. I am a indie publisher. I have been doing this since 2018, but recently I started doing audiobooks. And the reason for that is because I have a bunch of author friends like that I hang out with, and one of them I did an audiobook for, and he's like, "Hey, do you do this like as a service?" And I was like, no, I mostly just do my own audiobooks because my background is I am a YouTuber. I have studied multimedia within university, and I just know this stuff. So it seems like it was an easy transition to just do audiobooks. And so I did it. And then my friend was like, I told you so. And I now have a audiobook service, which I service several authors in many different genres from fantasy, sci-fi, thrillers. We've done a big romance, and also the more adult stuff, that tends to come with romance as well. So today we're going to talk about some tips for you all on how to make your own audiobooks as indie authors, as it's very important in today's age because audiobooks are booming, especially in 2020 when we were all stuck at home. Audiobooks had a little bit of an uptick. So if you are publishing novels or nonfiction, whatever that might be, it's a very good idea to have an audiobook there as well. Makes you look very professional, especially if you are on Amazon or maybe like Barnes and Nobles and you see that there's multiple formats there, beyond just the ebooks and the print versions. If you see audio there, it makes you look like a traditional publisher. So we're going to be talking about that today. Our goal is by the end of this masterclass, you should feel a little bit more comfortable in making and producing your own audiobooks. So to start off, what is an audiobook, and why do people listen? So typically the people who prefer audiobooks are going to be commuters, multitaskers, like busy folk, sometimes people like stay-at-home dads and moms who are doing chores and they like to listen to audiobooks as they're doing their chores at home. So, oh, and also auditory learners, and that's a big thing too. So most times people also, will just talk about the busy bees, but also people just retain stories sometimes better by their ears. And it's very interesting because I spoke about this with another author friend that I have, and they mentioned that it's kind of like we're going back to the campfire with audiobooks because that is originally how we told stories. One human to another is just by voice, not by text. Text is actually very new for us as the human species. Like we've only had, the printing press for so long, and we've only been writing things down for so long. Before all that, we had, our voices, and so it's kind of cool to see that kind of coming back. Like I said before, audiobooks are booming. Again, like I was saying before, the campfire vibe is kind of coming back. So that's really cool. So those are the people who are generally listening, and you want to be able to service those people. You of course want to have the print versions, your ebooks, and your physical copies, but it's good to have the audio there as well. Now let's go into like the nitty gritty of making your own audiobook. So narrators. So the first thing we'll talk about now are the narrators. There are different kinds of versions of narrators that you'll find when you're starting to look at audiobooks, whether you're doing it yourself or you're getting a service or going through ACX, which I'll explain later, or Findaway Voices. The most common one is the single narrator, and the single narrator is what you typically get from most audiobooks. It's the cheapest one to do. It's the easiest one to get produced. It's just one narrator, one story. Whether it's multiple POVs or one point of view, you're gonna have that one narrator do it all the way throughout. Then you have the dual narrator. Now, this is most common within the romance subgenre, or not the subgenre, but romance, and then all the subgenres that are within romance. And that's usually going to be your male and female POV, or if it's male, male, female, female, non-binary, non-binary, whatever that might be, you're going to have two voices in that story. Typically, they're going to be switching off each POV for each love interest. So you typically will have like maybe the first chapter in the female POV and then the second chapter in the male POV. That is pretty common, but mostly it's segmented just for romance. So if you are a romance author, you're definitely going to be looking at dual narration, which does get to be a little bit more pricey because you're dealing with two actors. There's mixing that you have to do for their levels for both. So watch out for that. The next step up above that would be called duet narration. Now that still is very similar to dual narration, but duet narration is taking it so that you are having every female voice in the story being done by a female actor. And then you also have that same thing for the male actor. Now with dual narration, you're having just one POV doing every voice. So if it's like, chapter one, Sean, then you're gonna have Sean speaking the entire time, even if the female counterpart is coming up in that chapter in dialogue. That male narrator is gonna go through it the entire way. Now, the difference between that and duet narration is that if, say, Sean meets Ashley, Ashley comes up, then the female voice actor would take that part. Now, this is again common in romance, but again, it does get pricey because there is more mixing involved on the back end of the editor. So watch out for that. So when you're looking at dual narration and duet narration, and by the way, the way I'm segmenting this when I'm talking about single, dual, and duet, I'm going in the order of like the expense. So single is definitely your most inexpensive option. Dual is a good option because you still get the vibe of both voices of the POV without breaking the bank. And then duet gets, a little bit more nitty gritty with it. But then the most expensive option that you'll see out there for audiobooks are called audio dramas. Now, audio dramas are something that came from like old radio shows. Where was that? It was that one radio show that got people scared. It was the day the Earth stood still with Orson. I'm forgetting the author's name, but basically they did that as a radio drama, saying that, oh no, like, aliens are invading, and they did this whole performance of people like, freaking out with like sound effects and music and all that kind of stuff, right? So people who were listening to that radio station were like, oh my God, I think we're being invaded, because it feels that, visceral. It feels like, it feels like it's actually happening. So this is definitely the most expensive option, because typically when you're doing an audio drama, you're having a full cast. So each character has their own separate voice. Very similar, like if you're, watching an animated movie, except you're not watching, anything, you're only hearing it, but you're getting everything that comes with like that animated movie. You're getting the music and the sound effects. You're getting different voices for each character. Now, sometimes you can play around with all of these different kinds of narrator types, because like audio drama, you can kind of fake it if you have maybe like one actor doing all the male voices, or maybe just a few male voices. Maybe you have like two actors who are doing all the male voices and two female actresses who are doing all the voices, but generally speaking, when you're doing audio drama, it's going to be a full cast with each and every character casted differently, including the narrator. So when you have the prose going on in the regular narration, you'll have that as a separate person as well. So that is mostly, like I said, there's going to be in between, but you're mostly going to have single narrator, dual narrators, duet narration, and then you also have audio drama full cast. So moving on to production, and that's where I kind of come in. That's where, because I don't actually narrate it myself, I'm just an editor, and I work with other talent who come to my home studio, which, by the way, my home studio is literally just PVC pipe and acoustic blankets. I looked up I looked up a tutorial on YouTube of a guy who literally just went to Home Depot, got some PVC pipe, like literally to build out my booth, my personal booth. For the PVC pipe portion of it was less than $10. Now, the acoustic blankets were a little bit more pricey. Sometimes you can get away with that by getting like packing blankets. That works almost as good as the real acoustic blanketing, but I wanted to be as like thorough as possible, so I got the full-on acoustic blankets. I do 3 wraparounds of my PVC pipe, and then I put one over the roof, so that all the audio can be trapped inside that booth and there is no echo. So what I do for production first is you're going to be casting. So casting is going out looking for the voice actor who's going to best work for your story. Typically, I will send out a sample of 250 to 500 words, about a page to a page, of a scene or several scenes that are very integral to the story itself. So if there's like a particular, like maybe there's a really sad scene that you need to make sure lands really well, maybe you want to put that out as your sample. Obviously, you can't have like these actors do an entire chapter. They have to do other auditions too. They can't spend an entire afternoon doing a chapter. So make sure that you're keeping it to a page to 2 pages when you are sending out those auditions. Then when you send those out, you'll start getting them in from the actors. You'll start, choosing. Sometimes you'll do something called a callback, which means you liked the narrator, like maybe the quality of the voice was there, but then the performance was a little bit off. So what you'll do is you'll send back notes saying, I really liked, what you did. However, I would like it if you, played this sentence differently or played this character differently. And that's actually a really good thing. I think more authors or producers, publishers should do that, because sometimes I feel like you can be too dismissive of a person. But if you can give someone direction and they can take that, that's actually a very, very valuable asset to have in a talent or an actor, versus just hoping you can just find someone who just has it right off the bat and just goes through with it. Because sometimes when you get that person and then you actually want to give them feedback, they actually don't take that feedback very well. So I actually really do suggest that most people do callbacks. It's a very important thing. After that, of course, once you've done all your casting, you will start recording. Very important to get a good mic, a good booth, or make sure that you're in a very quiet area. The main thing with audio narration is to reduce your echo. So right now, I would not record my audiobooks in the space that I'm in here. As you can see, I'm in my living room. It's too spacey, so my voice is going to be bouncing off of these walls, bouncing off of the back there and reflecting, and that is not pleasing to the audiobook world, or I guess the listeners or readers are going to have. So you want to make sure that you are insulated in some way. Literally, the way I started is I had a blanket just over my head, and that reduces echo. Then I graduated to my closet where, I just had my coats in there. Still to this day, I cannot, at my previous apartment, I had the perfect closet that I didn't have to treat at all. Like, I didn't have to put acoustic blankets or anything, just my coat. And then that space, I don't know what it was about that apartment, but it was like the perfect space for recording. You can also do that too if you have a walk-in closet or just so you have enough space to get in there. Or you can go the route of making your own booth, like I have my own DIY booth. Or you can actually you can spend lots and lots of money and get legit booths, like you see with recording artists who do vocals for rappers or singers and that sort of a thing. Editing. So the next thing will be editing. That is probably the most tedious part of the entire process. You can, of course, do this yourself. Everybody has a editor on their modern computers or modern tablets even today. So if you have a Mac or PC, Mac has GarageBand by default. PC, I'm not sure what you guys have on PC because I'm a Mac person, but I do know you can download Audacity. It's called Audacity for free. And there's also trials, like you can do Adobe Audition for free. There's a lot of audio editing software out there that you can get for very low cost or no cost at all. Then with mastering, you can most times do it in the same place that you edit. I personally master in a separate program that but it's called RX8, and it's very, very good at getting rid of the noise floor. Oh, by the way, noise floor means the kind of that white noise you sometimes hear at the bottom of a recording, like when there's just silence and you just hear like a little bit of a static. I have a program that gets rid of all of that. Sometimes you'll have to deal with mouth noises depending on the narrator, because sometimes narrators can get pretty mouthy, especially if it's been a long session, that you can hear a lot of that. You want to remove all that kind of stuff. And also the main thing is making sure that it's not too loud, especially when you're submitting to some of these audiobook platforms. They have very specific rules about the levels and all you do with that. So make sure that you're keeping in line with that, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on. But make sure you're keeping everything in line. It's very easy to have some of these audiobook platforms send these things back to you, and then you have to wait a whole nother 30 days, 60 days for your audiobook to get approved, and that's no good. You want to make sure your audiobook is out there for the masses when your ebook goes out, when your print copies go out and everything. And then there's delivery, which I was kind of segued into already, but delivery is getting it out to those distribution sites and all that, which we'll talk about now. So distribution. So there are two major players in the audiobook space right now in terms of distribution. One, which I'm sure most of you guys have heard about, is ACX, which is the company that goes out to Audible, the Amazon-owned company Audible. Then the other one, the one that I use, is called Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is if you want to be in as many stores as possible. If you want to go on Audible, that's cool. They are the largest platform by far. They have the majority market share, so you can be exclusive with them and be okay. They even give you, I think, incentives and deals for being exclusive with them. But I want to be as wide as possible, particularly because I want to be in libraries, because I do make, I write fiction. Particularly, I do fantasy for Black and African myth, whether it's the old timey stuff or contemporary. And I want to make sure that I'm in libraries so that they can get into schools or that anybody can pick them up. I don't like being, kind of in that exclusive bubble to just one company. But those are your options. There's also a new option that people are starting to realize. Spotify is starting to get into audiobooks. We also have YouTube, where you can actually put your audio on YouTube and just put ads on them. That's become an option as of late. Uh, but I personally suggest Find a Way if you want to be as wide as possible, because Find a Way goes to Google Play, Apple, Kobo, also Audible as well, Amazon, all the major audiobook platforms that you would want to be on. Find a Way has you covered. But of course, you can do Audible exclusive if you want that as well. Now, you can do all of this yourself. It does take time to learn, especially in particular, like I was saying before, the editing portion of it, including narrating yourself. Like if you actually want to, go maybe take a few classes with a voice artist. I actually have an author friend who does his own audiobooks, and he did the same thing I did, where he made his own booth and he just spoke into his microphone and he started editing, which is very funny. He started doing his own editing, but realizing how tedious it was, he actually started hiring out for it. So you do have that option. You can do it yourself and save some money, but of course you're going to be sacrificing your time. Or you can always hire out for these services. And places where you can hire out these services to are ACX, which is the Audible company I was speaking about earlier. They have a host of voice actors there. There's also voices.com that you can use. Find a Way Voices also has the option for narrators if you're looking for that. And also, there is an option for these platforms. Like ACX has a royalty share plan where you don't have to pay the narrator up front, but they take a cut of your profits on the back end. Find a Way also has an option like that, where you could do royalty share, or you can do like a half payment and then do royalty share, like a reduced version of that. There's a bunch of options out there, but I would definitely suggest those two major platforms in particular: Find a Way Voices and ACX. A is in Apple, C is in cat, and X is in xylophone. X is always very weird to kind of like do, right? Because xylophone is like, what's xylophone? That's should be with a Z, right? X. Anyway, that has nothing to do with it. But also, the reason I'm also here too and explaining this, and the reason I have all this experience, is because I have my own audiobook service, which I have referenced in the beginning of the video here, which I would like to show you guys now. I have a video that I would like to play for you guys, a little short trailer, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. All right, here we go.
Indie authors, need an audiobook? AB Book Services is here for you.
I remember waking up and rushing into her room. My feet stammering across the cold, hard floor, I watched in horror as the shadows did their menacing dance. Mama was huddled up on the floor, timid and frightened, like a cub about to be mangled by a hungry wolf.
We've edited over 1 million words of audio. Professional quality at affordable pricing.
I met with the distinct smell of cinnamon, a rarity on this cesspool of a planet. Navigator.
I keep telling you, Vex, it's okay to call me by my first name. It's Allison, in case you forgot.
From fantasy, sci-fi, thrillers, and romance.
The dampness between her legs was evidence enough of how badly she had wanted that kiss. She staggered into her room and leaned against the closed door, catching her breath and letting the delicious feeling of excitement calm down.
Make your audiobook a reality with AB Book Services.
And that is it. So so if you are looking for it, I typically work with indie authors. Also, I work with publishers as well. So if you find all of this too daunting, or you want to do maybe some of it, like you want to narrate your own thing, but you don't necessarily want to edit it, you can come to me. Maybe you don't. Maybe you need to find some talent, but you want to edit it yourself. I also have talent for you guys to look at as well. But yeah, so now we will open up to Q&A. I actually thought I was going to run out of time. I actually went through all of that information pretty quickly, so I'm sure there's some stuff that needs to be clarified. Here we go. I see the questions here. So, have you ever thought about being a voice actor? No, me personally, I hate it. For years, like I mentioned before, I still am a YouTuber to this day, and I do a lot of voiceover. Like one of my most popular videos is like Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender versus Korra from Legend of Korra, and I had to like voice that entire thing. And I hate my voice. I hate my cadence. I'm sure if I trained and I did it, I'm sure I could be better and everything. But I'm just not. I'm just not into it. So that's why I have a lot. I live in Los Angeles. I probably didn't mention. I don't think I mentioned that, but I live in Los Angeles, so I know a lot of people who are actors. So I just said, hey, actor friends that I know who I used to work with in the past, come on in and let's do some audiobooks. But me personally, yeah, no voice acting for me whatsoever. What are some of your biggest hurdles? My biggest hurdle with audiobooks, it's very funny. So whenever I'm editing narrators, they all have their different things that are difficult to edit. Some people can just go straight through, but then they flub a lot. Meaning I have to recut, make sure they're not repeating themselves, or that I make sure everything is clean. Some people have very distinct breaths, so like in between their words, they'll say sentence. Let me say like a comic book and convention checklist, plot armor, lit RPG, free revision. So then you have to cut out those breaths every time. And then other people, everyone has like the little things that are difficult to get through. So I would say editing, like I think I mentioned several times, like editing is the most tedious and the hardest thing to do with audiobooks in particular, because you are having to sit there. Like I just finished a 15 and a half hour audiobook for my own series, TJ Young and the Orishas, the Gatekeeper staff. And we spent, it had to have been like 30 hours in the booth, like 30 or 40 hours in the booth, having to go through everything, making sure the takes were right, making sure the performances are right, making sure everything was clear, and then me having to sit down and edit that. Now, there is a rule of thumb for editing. Whenever you are taking a manuscript and speaking it out, it typically takes twice the amount of time for an actor to be in the booth to do one finished hour. So like, let's say your audiobook is 1 hour. Typically it will take your narrator about 2 hours to complete that 1 hour of finished audio. And then for me as an editor, it takes 3 hours to finish 1 hour of finished audio. So if you calculate that, if you can, think about, hey, he did a 15-hour audiobook times 3. I'm not very good at math, so someone else do that math for me. That's how long it takes me to edit like one single audiobook. So yes, the hurdle definitely is like the tedium of editing the audio. Are multiple narrators usually more expensive than a single one, even if they're each reading a smaller portion of the book? Now, this depends on which service you're going with. And it depends on how different, like if you're recording in the same space, are these narrators remote? So if it's a case of same location, you're generally gonna not spend as much money because there's gonna be less mixing on the part of the editor, because if both narrators are recording in the same space, there's less things you have to do to make them sound similar. But if you're working remote, which I've done several times, like I just did a adult romance where both actors were remote, one in San Diego, the other in, I believe, Washington, D.C. That takes a little bit more time and they're recording on different microphones, right? One's working on a SM7B Shure mic, which I have here. I think she was working off a Blue Yeti, which is a USB microphone. So those have different sound profiles. So it takes me time to, mix those two together. So it's really dependent on those factors. So if you're having the actors come to the same space, much easier to have those mixed together. But if they're in separate spaces, it takes a little bit more time to get those mixed together. And that's the reason why the expense tends to go higher when you have multiple narrators, because you have, multiple variants. And even if they are in the same space, not all narrators' voices are going to be the same. And you want to make sure that someone's not, turning up their volume or lowering down their volume while they're going through your audiobook. So, even with having them in the same space, it could be very difficult to, or challenging to get them mixed properly. What was your favorite book to make audio for? Oh, so actually it was the one in the trailer. So the one you guys saw called Striker X, it was the sci-fi one with the gentleman with the sword and like the little cyber dog or whatever. That was so much fun because I got to do so much with sound. Obviously, each person, it was like a Boba Fett a Mandalorian kind of helmet that this character wore. So each time he spoke, I got to deal with like, I got to mix around and do that audio for like, it makes it sound like it's like make him sound like he's a Mandalorian or like Boba Fett from Star Wars. So that was like a really fun experience, and also like the ambience of like laser fights and like monsters that were in there. Playing around with like sound profiles, robot voices, because there was a time I think there's in that story he actually spoke to a robot assistant most of the story. So like, he'll like be like, navigator, and he'll like, do his walkie talkie. So I got to play around with a lot of sound effects. So that's always fun. Also, that's my genre too, that I, generally read on my, off time. But I will say that romance is definitely the one that I get the most work for, because romance writers write like a book a month, or like two books in 1 month. So that's who I get the most of. So whenever I get like a sci-fi or anything that I can like do that extra stuff with, it's always a joy. Always a joy. What is production like? How do you manage so many people that need to create a story? Production, generally, I think production is okay, or at least I've gotten it to a point where it's very streamlined, where I figured out, how certain people work. And also that's the thing too, like whenever I have a new client or a new author that I'm working with, they all have different kinds of things that they're very particular about, whether we're talking about the performance, the accents. Oh, that's a big one too. Our accents, that gets a lot of my talent hired, is because they have a wide range of accents. I have one lady who gets hired all the time because she's from Brooklyn and she has a Brooklyn accent. So people who are writing stories in New York or in and around New York are always like, oh, let me hire her. I have a guy who does a really good South African and West African. So if there's anybody doing like stories from that region, really good stuff. I have a guy who does like almost every voice, period. So he usually gets hired for things that have a lot of different characters, and he can just like rattle it off. But I wouldn't say I have a huge or the production. Well, I'll take you through the steps. So I'll build my booth here in the living room. Like, and literally like my trailer that I just showed, like all of that was recorded in my living room with my DIY booth at home. I'll build it, like I'll schedule time with a narrator. Usually I try not to go over 6 hours with them, because usually after 6 hours, the voice tends to get pretty raw. And then usually we'll take a break of like a week. So I'll edit what they did during that session. We'll take a break of a week so they can recover their voice, and then they'll come back in. So I'll build up my booth here. I'll set up my microphone. I wonder if I can pull this up so you guys can see this. So I have this arm here, which goes into my booth. We record in Logic Pro, which is what I use for the core editing for the audio. Mix it, make sure everything's good. They will leave and do their thing out in the afterworld. I stay in my chair. I edit. Sometimes there might be flubs or retakes that need to happen. So when they come back for their sessions, we'll do retakes. And then I get it ready for delivery. I make sure that my MP3 files are within the standards of these distribution companies like ACX and Findaway Voices, because they're very specific about the kind of sound profile, like how much noise floor you have, the white noise that you sometimes hear, and then send that off to my clients. And sometimes my clients will say, oh, hey, ACX said, it was too loud at this track. So I'll go back in and make sure that track is like within the standard. And then it gets released to the world, and hopefully everyone like enjoys it, and then people come back. What's the difference between an audiobook and a scripted podcast? I'm not really familiar with scripted podcasts, unless you mean audio drama, which I did discuss earlier in the in this masterclass. I'm assuming that's what that refers to, because I'm sure, we all listen to podcasts now, and audio dramas, or if you say radio drama, that's a very old school kind of terminology. So I'm guessing scripted podcast refers to what was once radio dramas. But yeah, the main difference with an audiobook, when someone's saying an audiobook, they usually are referring to someone who is doing a single narration, a single narrator, or they're referring to dual narration, which is most common in romance. And if that's the case, the difference is, you're really only dealing with one or two actors. If you're doing a scripted podcast or a radio drama, you're dealing with a full cast of upwards of 30, 40 cast members, depending on how big your book is. If your book is only if it's like Misery and you're just, in a cabin with two characters, then you could do a full cast audio drama with just two people, because there's only two people in that story, right? But then you have the, the sound effects and the music that, plays in. A very common, what I call a fake audio drama is Star Wars audiobooks. So if you ever listen to a single Star Wars audiobook, they always have like, you know, the licensed music with the Star Wars John Williams music, or you'll have blaster fire, lightsabers turning on, but it's still just one single narrator who's doing all the voices. So you have the best kind of both worlds. So sometimes I do give that option to clients where they say, oh, I do want, like, you know, sound effects, and I want to, oh, for instance, like the other thing I was referring to, the Striker X client that I had, the sci-fi project, that could almost seem like a audio drama, but it was only one single narrator. But we had the sound effects throughout. You know, we had the sounds of spaceships zooming by, or when they were in a forest, you had like the forest, or, you know, a blaster shot goes off, you have the blasters go off, but then you have one narrator who's doing all the voices. So there's ways that you can play around with the budget, and that's what I kind of offer for my services. Is that sometimes you'll see a per finished hour that's pretty high, like you'll see like, oh my god, $300 for per finished hour. So what I do is I break down everything that goes into those per finished hours so that the indies can make the choice of what they want, and I try to be as like flexible as possible for indies in particular, because I know for us, budgeting is a huge thing. So when you do look at my website, if you do visit it, you'll see that there's like a big breakdown of like my editing fee, if you want me to do a double pass, if you want me to do a manuscript prep, if you want sound effects, if you want musical interludes. Like there's ways that you can kind of get away with having more production quality without going like the full version, right? Which is something that I do in my books that people really enjoy, is that I do pretty clean audiobooks where for most of it, it's just the narrator. But when I have my chapter headings, I'll have a sound effect leading us into the scene, but not throughout, because that takes a little bit, you know, more time. But people still comment on that all the time, where they're like, oh my god, like the production was so great, even though I really didn't do that much. I did just a minimal amount of work, just for like the sound profiles, for like the interludes, but it goes a long way. What were my favorite projects? As I mentioned before, my favorite project was the sci-fi one that I worked on. That one was a lot of fun, because it was like I was able to actually edit a Star Wars audiobook, but it wasn't Star Wars. Hardest project to work on. So what I'm doing currently, I'm doing a romance audio drama that is very challenging. And I think it might be challenging because I'm not a typical reader of that genre. So I'm not as invested in the story, and thus my edits aren't as invested into the story. And most of my romance stuff is like that, where I'm just like, oh, it's a little bit harder for me to go through. But the cool thing about romance, here's the thing about romance. It's very comforting, because you always kind of know like the steps of like a romance storyline, right? You know, lovers meet each other, they go on their dates and kind of like, you know, find chemistry, they break up, there's a misunderstanding, they break up, and then they get back together in the end. So in terms of editing them is actually really easy, but in terms of like me engaging as like a reader, as a listener, it's a little bit harder. But like editing them is easy because I know exactly where I am in terms of like the storyline, how much space I need to put between an actor's performance, like when there's like a big drama piece or something like that. But yeah, so very easy to edit romance. It's just that I myself am not a romance listener. Tips for someone trying to start out. Now, for this person who's asking about the tips, are you asking as a narrator, or are you asking as an author? Are you asking as an editor? I could answer to all three. If you're starting as an actor, you will have to start off with having pretty low rates. You have to be pretty competitive, especially if you have no catalog. For the first year that I worked, I gave people like, I think 30% discounts if they were like a first-time client, very low rates. So I could build out my portfolio, and now that my portfolio is built, now I can kind of ask for the fees that I think I actually deserve for the kind of work that I'm putting into it. Like I was saying before, the way I calculated it is, you know, 3 hours to do one per finished hour for my actors, 2 hours to do one. So I tell my actors, I'm like, hey, what is your hourly rate? Okay, multiply that by 2. That is your per finished hour rate. For me, I think right now my starting rate is $90 per finished hour, which essentially breaks down to $30 an hour. So once I know all that breakdown, or once you build up that portfolio, then you can go off and go to the races with that. And I think that I don't have any more questions queued up. I did this pretty efficiently. I was like I was so afraid about my time running out, but I think we caught up unless there are more coming in. I don't know if there's more coming in. Oh, okay, cool. So if that's the case, I can wrap up early. Like this is a very, especially for like the video on demand, the VOD afterwards. It's like a very short. Oh, like cool. That was only 35 minutes. I'll watch that. Like I think that works very well. Unless you guys need me to stay. If Virtuous Quan needs me to stay and fill up the next 10 minutes. Okay, it's up to me. No, I think I'm good. If all the questions got answered in the chat, then I think we are good to go. Thank you guys for listening to me. Maybe here's what we'll do. We'll play the trailer one more time. I'll cue it up one more time, just so I can have it. In case someone needs to, like, we can just end off with it. So if anyone came in later or something like that. Talk about funny moments during work. Well, the funniest stuff. Okay, again, like I said, I'm doing a lot of romance, right, and a lot of adult romance. So I know most of the actors that I work with. So most times my direction is like, oh, hey, I think that character, should sound a little bit more defeated in this scene, or like, oh no, like it's an action scene. Can you like speed up your prose so that we can feel the action, right? The direction I have to give for some of these adult romance ones are a little uncomfortable, right? So I'm hearing, noises in my ear that I typically don't hear from these people. Like, I know them, most of them are my friends. And hearing them doing these intimate scenes sometimes can get a little bit uncomfortable. And the most uncomfortable thing that I just had, like, I think a week or two ago, I had to give a direction to one of my female narrators who was voicing one of the male characters. And I was saying, you have to do it like this. You gotta have to do it from your gut. You have to like really make it sound like you're having your moment, if you understand what I mean, right? And giving direction like that is just so very uncomfortable for me. I still have not gotten used to that. I'm trying to be like very professional and like keep a straight face and everything. And it's great too, because my booth, I don't have like a window into my booth, so I can't see what they're doing and they can't see me like reacting to what they're doing. So that's helpful. But yeah, that would be like a funny moment, I would say, for sure. But yeah, we'll round it out. We'll play the trailer one more time, and then we'll close out this panel.
Indie authors, need an audiobook? AB Book Services is here for you.
I remember waking up and rushing into her room. My feet stammering across the cold, hard floor, I watched in horror as the shadows did their menacing dance. Mama was huddled up on the floor, timid and frightened, like a cub about to be mangled by a hungry wolf.
We've edited over 1 million words of audio, professional quality at affordable pricing.
I met with the distinct smell of cinnamon, a rarity on this cesspool of a planet. Navigator.
I keep telling you, Vex, it's okay to call me by my first name. It's Allison, in case you forgot.
From fantasy, sci-fi, thrillers, and romance.
The dampness between her legs was evidence enough of how badly she had wanted that kiss. She staggered into her room and leaned against the closed door, catching her breath and letting the delicious feeling of excitement calm down.
Make your audiobook a reality with AB Book Services.
So my cat just, I guess he wants to say goodbye too, because he just came from his nap. I can tell he's like really sleepy. But cat time. All right, thank you guys for being here. Oh, I'm getting too loud. I'm sorry. You just woke up. I'm so sorry. But thank you guys all for being here. Again, I have my service here, but you also can do it yourself. It's very possible to do audiobooks from your home in this day and age. Distribution is very open now. There's no more gatekeepers except for your readers, which I think is the way it should be. Like, I think your readers and your listeners should be your gatekeepers, not necessarily a big time publisher. So that's it, guys. Thank you again. My name is Antoine Bandele. Peace. Much love to you.